Dilly had scrubbed her hands. Farrah had raced around the table, putting placemats at each spot. Tanker carefully put a hot bowl of soup at each of the pups' places. But Smudge didn't do anything to help. No one noticed, though, until they sat down for lunch. I was watching from the window, and everyone was talking and laughing, and I noticed that nothing at all was coming from Smudge's chair. Smudge was not there. I asked each pup if they'd seen him, and they all shook their heads. They'd all been so busy that no one noticed where Smudge had gone. Well, I don't have to tell you that all of a sudden I was full of worry. In 2 seconds, 4 bowls of cream of bone soup sat by themselves at the table, and the 3 pups were outside with me. We hunted all through the neighborhood. Petunia hadn't seen him, nor had Bilko. Montelier thought he might be at the park, but he wasn't. As we drove home, Farrah wondered what would we do if we didn't know where he was or how we could ever rescue him. Rescuing Smudge was starting to worry me, until we spotted him in the sandbox as we drove in. I was happy we had found him, but when I called out, he didn't even answer. Smudge was having a terrific time, and he didn't seem to be paying any attention to us. Then he finally looked up. He was glad to see us. He told us that he had been busy building a super-duper sand city, and he wanted us to have a look at it. He whizzed his cars in and around the buildings, and truly it was quite a piece of work. I asked him if he had heard us calling for him earlier, and Smudge nodded as he drove another car along the roadway. I asked him why he hadn't come, and he didn't even look up. He just told me that he was busy and he wanted to play in the sand. Now I have to tell you that I was glad Smudge was safe, but I was not too pleased with his answer. I was very glad he was safe, and I was very glad he was just playing in the sandbox, but I was not very glad that he had not obeyed me. That means he had not come or answered when I called. Smudge didn't even notice I was upset until Dilly said his name and he looked up. He could tell something was wrong because we were all looking at him. Slowly he put his car down. I explained that it is everyone's responsibility to come or answer when I call. I asked Smudge if he could think of a good reason why it might be important. Smudge thought, but Dilly answered me first. She told him that maybe there was a special treat he might miss. Tanker added that there could be a family emergency where someone needed him. Farrah said it was also important for safety because everybody might be worried that something had happened to him when he was just playing in the sandbox. Smudge looked up. He apologized. He said he never really thought it was that important. He knew the alarm was important, but just being called hadn't mattered much to him. He knew I was disappointed in him, and he promised right then and there to answer every time his name was called. And I told him I was very glad to hear it. At that moment, I heard something else, the alarm. I have to say that Smudge was the first one on board, and in seconds we were off. In just minutes, we arrived at the pond. It was Louisa, the ladybug, and she was very worried about her son Speck. Even though his mother had told him, he kept forgetting to stay in line with the other children. Louisa had been searching for him, just as we had been searching for Smudge. When he finally answered, Louisa was very relieved until she saw where he was. She pointed out to the middle of the pond. There was the tiniest leaf floating there. Using our telescope, we could see Speck was riding the leaf over the water. He hadn't meant to go far, but the wind picked up and carried him off. Well, now the problem was how to get to him safely. The pups huddled and then raced around to get life jackets. When they had them on, they each stepped into the water. Holding onto a rope attached to me, Smudge held onto Tanker, and Dilly held onto Smudge. The pups formed the famous Pumper Pups chain. Farrah, holding onto Dilly, tiptoed out as far as Speck. Gently, Farrah dipped her hand under the leaf that floated in the water. She scooped up the leaf and Speck. Carefully, she passed the leaf to Dilly, who passed it to Smudge, and Smudge passed it to Tanker. Slowly, Tanker placed Speck and the leaf safely on the shore. Then he pulled in the pups. Soon the 4 dripping, wet pups were standing on the bank with one tiny ladybug and his mother. Smudge told Speck that he needed to listen to his mom when she told him not to do something. Speck looked up at Smudge and nodded. He would try. Smudge told Speck he'd be proud of him if he did. Louisa whistled for her other children, and this time Speck got right in line and followed the way he should. I told Smudge I was proud of him for helping teach Speck the right thing to do. He was very happy, too. Back at home, I reheated the soup, and soon 4 pups were around the table, all talking at the same time. Things were as they were supposed to be, and I was happy about that. And I'm sure you'll remember that when someone you know and trust calls you, you should answer too. So they won't worry. I just know that you'll do it. Every time.